Miscarriage is unfortunately something that has touched most of our lives. Whether we've experienced a miscarriage ourselves or been with a sister or a friend as they endured a miscarriage, as Catholics who are always open to life and having lots of pregnancies a lot of times, miscarriage is something that we all deal with. But most of us have a confusing time going through it. Not only is the grief overwhelming, sometimes we're confused about exactly what we should do with the remains of our baby, where this baby went, and what this whole experience meant. I personally have been through 2 miscarriages and 1 stillbirth loss. They were all so different and all so painful, and for most of them, I didn't really know what I should do to navigate this loss within my Catholic faith. I found finding these answers really difficult, and I only actually discovered most of them through this wonderful book, which I highly recommend. It's called Grieving Together, A Couple's Journey Through Miscarriage. It was actually written by 2 of my good friends, my friend Laura Fanucci and her husband Franco. They both have experienced some tremendous loss, and they're both very serious Catholics. So anyway, I'm Nancy from Catholic Sprouts, and I want to take today's video to just break down some of the Catholic Church's teaching on miscarriage. There's a lot of confusion, there can be a lot of hurt, and a lot of times the pastor that you are with as you navigate this loss doesn't actually have all of the information. It's not their fault, they just aren't necessarily informed about it. And they oftentimes can be overwhelmed by the grief that you are experiencing. So today we're going to talk about things like what to do with the remains of your baby, what if you don't have the remains of your baby, where the baby went, if you can name the baby, and different rites that you can use while doing a funeral or burial service for your baby. So I hope that this answers some of your questions. I also hope that some of these beautiful things from the church, and trust me, the church is very understanding and very loving and cares very much about the baby that you've lost, even if the people in your life haven't portrayed this. So I just want to give you a little bit of comfort and to tell you that I've been there and there is life on the other side. If you can see, I'm actually currently pregnant, 33 weeks, with a little baby boy. The pregnancy before this ended in a stillbirth loss. So God doesn't always grant more babies. It's a mystery that we're all navigating. But there is life on the other side of loss in one way or another. So question number 1, can we have our baby baptized after we've lost a baby in a miscarriage or a stillbirth loss? Now the answer to this is actually no. The sacraments are meant for living members of the church, people that are alive on this earth, and we need a channel through which God's grace can flow. That's what a sacrament is. So we would never baptize a baby that dies before birth. If your baby is born alive and lives for just a little while outside of the womb, then yes, absolutely, baptize that baby. Baptize that baby immediately. A baptism can be done by anyone, does not need to be a priest. It can be done by a father or a mother with sterile water in an emergency room. But all 3 of my losses, the first, or 2 of them were early miscarriage losses, and then we did actually deliver a stillbirth baby, but all of them were born already deceased, so baptism was not an option for any of them. However, there's lots of beautiful rites that the Catholic Church has and ways to bless and place this baby into the merciful hands of God, just not baptism. The next question that many people have is whether you can name your baby that has been lost in miscarriage. The answer to this is a big, big yes. In fact, I really encourage you to name the babies lost in miscarriage in your family. By naming them, they can become an important part of your family history. They also can be discussed more easily by your children. In fact, the 3 children that we lost to miscarriage are Peter, Max, and Catherine. We pray to each of their patron saints each night, and follow-up question to this is, what happens to our babies after they die? This is a great question, and it's very confusing. A lot of the times when you're grieving miscarriages, people will talk about your angel baby or how God has another angel in heaven. This is not true. We know that angels do exist, they're a real thing, but God created all of the angels at the beginning of time. Angels are purely spiritual beings. They never were people that were alive and went to heaven. They were created as angels. So none of us are going to die and go to heaven and be an angel, and our babies certainly don't do that either. However, we do believe that our babies can become saints. Now, what is the true definition of a saint? A definition of a saint does not mean that it has to be someone that has been recognized by the church. That's only one way to think of a saint. Another way to think of them is someone that is in heaven, the communion of saints. These are people that are faithful to God, whether they are in heaven, on earth, or in purgatory, on their way to heaven. So our babies join the communion of saints. And since they have died sinless, they don't need to go to purgatory. So our babies are in heaven. Anyone that is in heaven is at the absolute altar of God. And therefore, they have access to God in a way that we don't quite have. And they can become powerful intercessors for our families. This sounds a little crazy, and it definitely requires a leap of faith. But my family has experienced powerful intercessions, especially through the baby that we lost through stillbirth. We named that baby Max for St. Maximilian Kolbe, and the conversion that it has brought about by praying to him, asking for his intercession both from our baby and from St. Maximilian Kolbe, has brought about a tremendous conversion for myself and my husband. And we feel that we are under the protection of our Blessed Mother in a way that we couldn't have imagined before. And so whether you do have another baby after your loss or not, I truly believe that there is life, there is blessings after loss. There's pain, there's grief, yes. But if you're open to it, there are amazing opportunities for life as well. Okay, now along with this, I did say that our babies are in heaven and that they can be saints. A question that I should probably back up and answer is something that really bothered me as a child. Now, I'm one of 5 children on this earth, but my mother had 11 pregnancies. In fact, at the end, she had a series of stillbirth losses. It was pretty rough, and I was old enough to know that my mother was expecting. She'd go in for her 20-week ultrasound, and a couple of times in a row, then find out that the baby had passed. We mourned, and in each of these situations, we had remains of a baby to bury, so we did that in our local cemetery. At the same time, I was attending a very conservative Catholic camp for girls, which was incredibly formative. It was amazing, it really was. But at this camp, we had recently come off, one summer while we were there, we had recently just experienced another of my mother's stillbirth losses. And I remember asking a very old nun where these babies were. And she told me that they were in limbo. Now, have you ever heard this? This is kind of an older teaching. It's not brought up anymore, but it was a couple of generations ago. The idea that unbaptized babies, whether they actually were born alive or not, that they don't go to heaven, that they go to limbo. Now, for my sisters and I at this camp, this was devastating news. I remember weeping because we felt confidently in our souls, in the absolute core of our being, we believed that these babies were in heaven and that we would be there driving around heaven in a giant minivan one day with all of our siblings lost to miscarriage or stillbirth. So this was devastating news, and I never really dealt with it. But while reading Laura's book, I discovered a very freeing truth, and I hope it frees you too. Now, the concept of limbo is not church doctrine. It never was published in a catechism. You won't find anything about limbo in there. It was never published in a papal document that was seen as infallible. Instead, here's how the teaching of limbo came about. Way back, when people were first introducing baptism, they wanted to really enforce how important baptism was. And so they decided to start teaching, and I think there might be some valid truth to this, that people that weren't baptized probably weren't going to be saved, or that it was tricky. And so unbaptized babies would go to limbo. That's what they taught. And again, this is not church doctrine. And that teaching got transferred over to miscarriage, even though they were talking about more so people that had been born and lived on this earth, never been baptized, and died. And again, it was just to really encourage people to baptize their baby. Probably didn't go about it in the right way, and it was never intended to be applied to miscarriage. So now, actually, in 2007, before this, JP2 had enlisted a council to look into this. Like, what is the teaching of limbo? Should it be doctrine? That council studied for a long time, and actually under Pope Benedict, they finally issued a document that said, well, it said we don't know, right? Death is the great leap. But it said something very beautiful. Basically, it said that we don't necessarily know for sure where these babies go, but we do know one thing for sure. We know that God is love, that God is mercy, and that He's not cruel, right? That we believe that these babies are true human beings. God does too, and God will respond with mercy and love. And therefore, how can we think that our babies are anywhere other than with Him? Now, this is the truth that I felt so strongly as a child. It's the truth that I feel incredibly strongly as a mother. Especially our stillbirth loss, I felt that baby move. I was able to deliver that baby and hold him. And the idea that he is anywhere other than resting in the arms of our beloved Mother Mary in heaven, well, that's just ludicrous. He absolutely is there. I can feel it, I know it, and I feel confirmed in my faith, as I'm sure you do as a mother who has also lost babies. So don't worry about the teaching of limbo. It did serve a purpose, and baptism is so important. But it was never meant to be applied to miscarriage, and it runs counter to our understanding of God. Now, the final question is what you should do with the remains of your baby after a loss. Now, before we get here, I want to tell you that for many of us that have experienced early loss and miscarriage, we don't have remains to bury or to do anything with. And that can be painful. It can oftentimes make us feel regretful, but you really shouldn't. In fact, for 2 of my losses, I lost a baby at 9 weeks and a baby at 8 weeks. I didn't have any remains for those. I don't actually, it was hard to pinpoint exactly what was the baby because things were so small. And another one, I had to have a DMC, and the hospital disposed of the baby without asking me. And I never had any remains to do anything with. So first of all, don't feel bad about that. Remember that although it's painful, and although if you have the opportunity, you should try to do something with the remains of your body, the last loving act that we can do for our children is simply to entrust them into the hands of God. We do that by burying them, but we also do that by simply letting go of them, by trusting that God's plan is better and that He has this, that things out of our control are simply out of our control, and that He will take care of that baby. Now, if you do have the remains of the baby, there are some things that you can do. If you deliver at a hospital, a lot of times the hospital will have to communicate with the cemetery and transfer the remains there. A lot of states have regulations about moving the remains of a human person. We had our stillbirth loss in Kansas, and we ended up burying the baby back in Minnesota, where we are from and where we will end up most likely. So we buried the baby there, and we transported the baby ourselves. It's not pretty and it's hard, but these things are possible. Also, in many cemeteries, a new thing that they do is that they offer a special place or a place in the cemetery, even maybe part of a mausoleum, where they have a place to bury or memorialize babies lost before birth. At the cemetery we went to, in the back corner, is a beautiful little place where you can bury the remains of babies lost in miscarriage or stillbirth. They're just simple little grave markers, but it is really a beautiful thing, and it's powerful to us to have a place to go to remember not only our baby lost in stillbirth, but all 3 of the babies that we've lost through miscarriage. So check into that. Also, a lot of Catholic hospitals do offer burial services or memorials for babies lost in stillbirth a couple of times a year. So if you don't have remains, that can be a powerful thing to do, or if you just want to be part of a larger experience, that can be really powerful too. Ask around. I have found that especially lately, people are becoming much more sensitive to miscarriage loss, and there are some beautiful services if you ask. Finally, if you have the remains of your child, or even if you don't, and you would like to do a funeral or burial service for that baby, there are lots of good options. There are options for burying a baby that is not baptized and all sorts of things. In fact, an entire funeral mass is possible. Laura and Franco cited a lot of these in this book. A lot of times priests aren't familiar with these rites, and you might need to sort of help them figure it out, or they're not even sure if it's possible. It is. And having this book on hand is a great resource, and it will allow them to find exactly what they can and cannot do. And although it might be painful during your time of loss to educate your priest on these things, it can be a beautiful gift to those that come behind you, that come after you, that also experienced a loss. So you really could be giving a great gift to your parish and to the future parishioners of this priest. Now, I know this was a lot of information. I hope that it is helpful and actionable, whether you are going through a miscarriage right now or know someone who is. But I want to leave you with this. Now, grief is real. After you lose a baby, what you are feeling is real grief. A lot of times when there isn't a baby, the remains of a baby, or you weren't even showing, you weren't that far along in pregnancy, you can doubt that what you experienced was real. Take care of yourself, take care of your husband, allow him to take care of you. So once again, I'm Nancy from Catholic Sprouts. I hope that this video was helpful, and if it was, I really encourage you to share this video with other women you might know that have experienced loss. Once again, I encourage you to pick up this great book, Grieving Together by my friends Laura and Franco Fanucci. It's a really powerful resource and will really help you go through the grieving process. If you're new here to Catholic Sprouts for Moms, please consider subscribing so you don't miss a single video. I'm back every week with more, so I'll be back soon. But until then, I encourage you to join me in the good, humble work of parenting, which is doing small things with great love. I'll see you soon.